how many and how much contribution we're getting from the community. And I'll try to follow William's guidance and try to limit my talk to about 10 minutes and make sure there are at least like 15 minutes left for questions. So I'm showing my handbook page for the Code Contributor Program. Like all handbook page, it's love to get any feedback or suggestions on this if anything's missing. I'll cover a couple of sections here. One of the things I'd like to talk about is triaging merge requests from communities. So as many of you know, the contributions that come from people outside of GitLab team members get labeled with the label community contribution. And one of the challenges in the past was that this was being done very manually by people. So what will typically happen is that somebody makes a contribution from outside of GitLab, and if people notice it because they it referenced the issue they filed or it's a product area they're working on, and they'll notice it and they'll put a community contribution label on it, or people run a query on MRs randomly and then or on a regular basis and put this label on it. But thanks to the work that was done by the GitLab quality team, we automated that process. So if anything's not labeled as community contribution by somebody at GitLab, there's a bot that runs on the daily basis, Monday through Friday, early UTC time, and they'll catch anything that's not labeled as community contribution. It gets automatically labeled. So that's been automated, and then if you subscribe to that label, like myself, is that you'll get a daily email of here are all the MRs that came from the community that's been labeled by the bot. So what I've been trying to do as soon as I get them is basically do some basic triaging so that it gets put in front of the right people at GitLab for them to review and start the discussion with community members. So I'll typically involve like the product team members or engineering managers that I need to put this in front of. And the GitLab team members have been outstanding in terms of like getting back to people. I mean, sometimes within like an hour or so, they'll acknowledge the contribution and start reviewing the contribution from the community. So that definitely accelerated the speed at which community MRs are being reviewed and also being merged. So that definitely hopefully made community members feel more welcome and also know who they need to reach out to if there are MRs that are not being addressed in a timely fashion. They'll know that I looked at it and various product managers have looked at it. So if they have any questions or concerns about MRs not being reviewed in a timely fashion, they'll know who to go to. So that's, I think we started this like early in Q4, and it's the results have been pretty promising, and I'm very happy with how things have been reviewing so far. So the next item I want to talk about, I think there were some questions about like a metrics or stats. Do we have a good idea in terms of how many contributors we have and how much contribution we're getting? And you've probably seen this dashboard that we traditionally had, contributors at gitlab.com. So, I mean, obviously this gives you an idea of like who's been contributing and how many contributions have been coming. I mean, one of the things that this dashboard or this page doesn't give you a sense of is like, if you don't work at GitLab, you don't necessarily know like if any of these people work for GitLab or they're coming from outside of the GitLab circle. So what I started doing back in October was work with the organization called Biturgia, and they have a lot of experience in creating community dashboard for different open source projects. And as a matter of fact, I worked with them before I came to GitLab and asked them to create a dashboard for GitLab. So in the handbook, you'll see a couple of paragraph description on the dashboard. I mean, it even includes, where to find different types of dashboard you might be interested in. And also there's like a live stream channel for training video if you're interested in seeing more detail. But for the most part, I mean, even for me, like more than 95% of the data that I want to see on a daily basis from the community is on this dashboard that I highlighted in the handbook. So if you click this link, that will basically, whoops, let me do this, sorry about that. So they'll take you to this dashboard. It's kind of busy with a lot of data in there, but it gives you an idea of how much contribution we're getting. So you'll see that I have the label of community contribution, and I just want to look at MRs that's been merged. And I set the time frame default to like last 10 years, so we get the whole historical view from the GitLab community. And you'll see that, I mean, there's been like over 950 people that have been contributing over the history of the GitLab project. So, I mean, if you look at the previous, like a number, like, you know, we talk about having over 2,000 contributors. And out of that, like close to 1,000 of them are people from outside of GitLab, which I think is a pretty impressive number. And there have been over 3,000 MRs merged. And there are a lot of interesting things that you can do on this dashboard. I mean, for example, you can do a lot of filtering. For example, if you want to just look at CE as an example, you can just filter for this value, and you'll see the numbers change. The number of contributors went down from 900 something to 800 or so, and then, you know, merge requests gone down below like 3,000 number. So it's a pretty powerful tool that you can play around with if you're interested. And I'm just going to deselect that filter there, and I'll point out a couple of things. I mean, one of the questions that I think I got about a month ago was that, well, how many contributors do we have over the course of the GitLab project? And it's a little skinny, so it's a little hard to see, but I'll hover over it. So if you look at the data over the last 3 years, like 2016, we had over 222 submitters. And then that number goes up to 314 in 2017. And last year, we ended up at 448. So year over year, like the last 2 years, we've seen like over 40% increase, which I think is a pretty impressive number. And obviously, I'd like to see that grow even further this year. Obviously, we have incomplete data for this year, but we're already at like 30 in early part of in January. So hopefully, we'll see continued growth in the community members that are contributing to GitLab. So this gives you a sense as to, you know, how many contributions that we've been getting over the past couple of years. And the other thing you can do, you can toggle this into a table view. In the table view, you can like download this or export this to like a CSV file if you want to create a slide or presentation. So that's another thing you can do. A couple of other things I want to point out is I'm going to scroll down here. So in both table view and a graphical view, if you want to see like a top contributors as an example from outside of GitLab, this gives you an idea. Some of you may recognize these IDs or names because many of these are part of our core team. Obviously, they've been regular contributors to GitLab. So it sort of gives you like a stack ranking of top contributors over the years. Yeah, I'm trying to see if we can sort of modify the slide because this others column dwarfs the other numbers. So the others are a little hard to see, but I'll see if I can make tweaks to that. And the other thing is you can also look at contributions per different releases that we had. For 11.6, we had a record, 176. I think having a hackathon in November definitely helped. But so I mean, David and I were very excited about that number for 11.6. And obviously, unfortunately, there was a dip at 11.7, mostly due to the holidays. Obviously, the contributions slowed down over the holiday period, but I think a lot of those got pushed to 11.8. So hopefully we'll see an uptick again for next few releases. So that's it in terms of a quick overview of the dashboard. In a couple of minutes I have left, I guess I'll talk about sort of what we want to work on next with the community. I mean, one of the things that you'll see here, you'll see like a submissions by different organizations. A vast majority of them, it'll say unknown because people typically have their like a personal email addresses like their Gmail accounts associated with their GitLab ID. So the organization typically doesn't show up. And you'll notice like GitLab here, and what this is that, I mean, there are some of the MRs that were submitted by community members, like for whatever reason, they couldn't complete the work. So sometimes like a merge request coaches will have to pick, carry it over the finish line. I mean, in those instances, it looks like the MR was submitted by a GitLab person, but they still put a community contribution label on there. So we because we want to give credit to the community for the work, like the bulk of the work that was done. Interestingly, the only customer that sort of used their work email address seems to be CERN. But this gives us a challenge in terms of, like, I mean, I hear anecdotally there are some customers that are contributing to GitLab, but I don't have a very good picture of that, like who those customers are. So that's one of the things I'd like to work on. Obviously, this is a key value proposition for GitLab. If you're a customer or a user of GitLab, and if you want to make, suggestions for improvement, or if you have new feature ideas, you can not only make those requests, feature requests, but you can actually, if you're interested, get your hands dirty and help improve our product. So I'd like to get a better sense as to who those customers are and see if there are ways we can support them better. One of the things that I did last month, coincidentally, I have a monthly blog post highlighting different contributors to GitLab, and this is Alexis Reigel from Siemens. He's been a longtime contributor, and I mean, he sort of manages a lot of the contribution to GitLab from Siemens side of things. So it was really interesting to get his perspective in terms of his experience with contributing to GitLab. So he actually is, like, unprompted, he talks about like a minimal viable change in some of our values. So I certainly enjoy working with him and the Siemens team on this blog post. And if there are other customers that's worth highlighting and that might be interested in doing this, I'd be more than happy to work with any of those customer contributors and highlight their work and thoughts as well. And just one other last point that I want to mention before I turn over to questions is that when you look at the dashboard, I think I indirectly talked about it. This sort of other column. So these are, I mean, these are people that have made like a 1 or 2 contributions per year, and that number kind of dwarfs people that make regular contributions, like, more than like a 5 or 6 per year. So I'd like to start converting more of these casual contributors to more become like a regular contributor. But that's something that I've started thinking about over the past few months. But hopefully we'll see a increase in the number of regular contributions, and hopefully I can come back with an update at some point. I think I went a bit too long, but I mean, David, are there things that you think I missed, or anything you want to add?
No, I think that's good. I think it'd be interesting to see what questions there are.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah,
I think. Yep.
Yeah, that was great. What I'll do is say goodbye and thanks to the folks